Hey guys, tonight we drift back thousands of years where dawn breaks not over alarm clocks and coffee makers but over dusty riverbanks and tiny clay houses. You find yourself lying on a reed mat in ancient Mesopotamia, a world that smells of damp mud, baking bread and smoke from crude ovens. There's no soft pillow here, just a woven headrest that makes your neck ache before you've even rolled over. Your first groggy thought? You probably won't survive this place for a day, but let's see how long you last. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like sharing, drop your location and local time down in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first sensation is heat. The sun hasn't fully risen, but the clay walls of your mud brick home already radiate a low warmth that sticks to your skin. Outside, the Euphrates shimmers like a ribbon of hammered bronze, promising both life and back-breaking work. You shuffle barefoot across the packed earth floor, dodging a clay jar that holds yesterday's barley beer, flat and sour. The family goat blats indignantly, demanding someone feed it before it chews another hole in the reed matting. You step into the courtyard and find neighbors already at work. Women grind grain between stone querns, rhythmic and endless, their hands calloused. Children chase each other barefoot, their shouts echoing against plastered walls patched with straw. You try to stretch your back, but the air is heavy with dust. A man carrying a wicker basket of reeds greets you, his tunic stained with river silt. He's heading to help reinforce the irrigation canals, a duty as vital as it is exhausting. And here's where you loll. Earn your first reality check. Civilization means schedules. The Sumerians invented one of the earliest calendars, and the farmers live by it like clockwork. You grab a wooden hoe and trudge toward the fields. The earth is cracked and stubborn, thirsting for water. Canals dug by hand keep the crops alive, but they need constant clearing. You bend and scoop clods of mud, your tunic sticking to your chest. The work is monotonous yet vital. Without barley, the village starves. By mid-morning, sweat stings your eyes. A neighbor hands you a hunk of flatbread, dense and chewy. You wash it down with beer that tastes like soggy cereal but keeps you hydrated. Fun fact, beer was safer than river water, so even kids drank it. Historians still argue whether this early brewing was more about safety or just a happy accident that gave people a buzz while they worked. Either way, you burp and wipe your mouth, realizing you've accidentally invented brunch. The fields stretch endlessly, dotted with date palms casting meager shade. Every so often, someone calls for help lifting a broken water gate. You stagger over, grab the rope, and pull until your arms burn. The gate creaks, water gushes into a ditch, and a little boy cheers, an audience of one for your first heroic act. You grin despite yourself, though the smile falters when your back twinges. Farming is less pastoral bliss and more CrossFit without sneakers. By afternoon, you slump under a palm tree. A scribe from town passes by with a clay tablet tucked under his arm. He glances at your mud-spattered tunic and smirks. You don't know it yet, but he's holding the earliest form of recorded history, cuneiform marks etched into clay. While you break your back in the fields, he scratches wages and crop counts into a tablet. The social hierarchy is already alive and well, and you're firmly at the bottom. A cool breeze from the reeve carries the smell of fish and marsh plants. You close your eyes, letting your aching muscles soften for a moment. The truth hits you. Civilization isn't glamorous. It's dirty, noisy, and exhausting. But in these muddy fields, humanity planted the first seeds of cities, writing, and law codes. And you're just one more sore-backed soul who hopes tomorrow brings a little less dust in your teeth. The sun creeps higher over the river, and your brief rest ends with the sharp crack of someone shouting for more hands at the threshing floor. You wipe the grit from your eyes and shuffle toward a courtyard where barley stalks are piled high like golden mountains. Here comes your introduction to breakfast in the Fertile Crescent, part bread, part beer, and 100% back pain. A group of men in saffron tunics beat the stalks with wooden flails, dust rising like clouds that coat your throat. Women scoop the loosened grain into wicker baskets, their arms moving in steady circles as if their muscles have long since given up protesting. You're handed a crude sickle with a chipped stone blade. One wrong swing and you'll either clip your foot or send straw flying into your face. The rhythm is mind-numbing. Chop, scoop, carry, dump. By the third load, your shoulders throb like you've just done 20 push-ups with a goat sitting on your back. But the reward? Bread. Someone pulls flat discs from a clay oven, their edges blackened, their centers chewy and steaming. You bite into one, and the taste is earthy, almost sour but filling. To wash it down, there's beer, except this isn't your frothy pint at the pub. It's cloudy, warm, and drunk through reed straws to avoid swallowing the floating husks. You grimace, then drink again, because oddly enough it works. It fuels your body better than the river's questionable water. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian beer was nutritious food or just a pleasant way to forget your aching spine. Either way, you're tipsy before lunch. Children laugh as they stamp on grain with bare feet, helping to loosen the chaff. A little. E-girl stumbles and nearly topples into the pile, but her mother scoops her up, laughing as if the endless labor is a game. You can't decide if this is charming or tragic. Probably both. Someone teases you for your slow pace, so you double your effort, sweat dripping from your chin into the straw. At noon, the sun is ruthless, and so is your boss. You're assigned to carry sacks of barley back to storage. Heavy, scratchy sacks that bite into your shoulders like angry cats. You stumble through narrow lanes between mud brick houses, dodging goats while curious dogs sniff the grain. By the time you dump the sack into a granary pit, you're dizzy from heat and the faint buzz of beer still clinging to your head. In the corner of the yard, a curious sight. Someone is mashing dates and barley together in a clay pot, experimenting with flavors. A neighbor nudges you and whispers that people believe this mash cures headaches. You're skeptical but take a sniff anyway. It smells like vinegar mixed with mud. Still, you make a mental note. If the back pain gets worse, maybe the ancients' weird remedies are worth a gamble. You sit under a reed canopy for a brief rest, gnawing on another hunk of bread. The air smells of baking loaves, but also of sweat and animals. There's no escaping the blend. Flies buzz around your face, undeterred by your half-hearted swats. Across the yard, a priest scribbles cuneiform marks into a clay tablet, keeping track of which families delivered their quota of grain. You realize this bread and beer system isn't just about survival. It's a kind of currency. Grain is wealth, beer is wages, and bread is breakfast, lunch and dinner rolled into one chewy disc. By evening, your arms hang limp at your sides, barley chaff clinging to your hair. You ache everywhere. A neighbor pats you on the back, laughing, and says this was a light day. You try to smile, but instead groan, thinking of tomorrow's harvest all over again. Civilization's gift to you so far: a full belly, a mild buzz, and a spine that feels 30 years older than it did this morning. The next morning, your reprieve from the grind doesn't last. A stranger with a shaved head and a reed whip announces you've been volunteered for royal duty. Translation: you're about to spend a day building one of the pharaoh's oversized vanity projects. Welcome to the pyramid shift. You're herded into a caravan of workers trudging toward the horizon where white limestone blocks shimmer like teeth under the desert sun. The air feels baked, as though someone slipped you into an oven preheated to eternal suffering. Your job: hauling limestone. That block over there, Yes, the one roughly the size of your neighbor's hut weighs about 2.5 tons. You join a dozen other unlucky souls looping thick ropes around it, your bare feet digging into the sand. A man beats a drum to set the rhythm, and together you heave. The block lurches forward on a sled greased with animal fat, every creak threatening to snap the ropes and your sanity in half. By the third pull, your shoulders feel like molten lead. Historians still argue whether these monuments were built entirely by slaves or by seasonal workers doing state service. Either way, the result for you is the same: blisters blooming on your palms and sweat pouring into your eyes. Someone shoves a cup of water into your hand. You gulp it down, tasting more sand than refreshment, then return to pulling. The overseer offers encouragement in the form of shouted insults, which echo against the half-finished pyramid face. A man beside you mutters about sneaking away at night, but everyone knows the desert swallows deserters whole. Better to risk a snapped tendon here than jackals out there. As if to punctuate the thought, a jackal's cry drifts across the sand, making your neck prickle. At midday, you collapse in the shadow of a half-raised block. Bread is passed around, dry and crumbly, followed by a jar of that sweet sour beer. Someone jokes it tastes like camel spit, and you almost choke laughing because, honestly, he might be right. The humour keeps you moving, though, and soon you're back at the ropes, chanting with the drum beat, every pull scraping more skin from your hands. You pause for a moment to notice the artistry around you. Skilled stonemasons chisel blocks with copper tools, sparks flying in the desert glare. They work with eerie precision, whispering prayers to Ptah, god of craftsmen, hoping the next strike won't chip wrong. One mason shows you a trick, using wooden wedges soaked in water to split stone. Ingenious, but you're too tired to applaud. By late afternoon, your tunic is soaked, your throat raw. You stagger past a group of workers dragging smaller stones on sledges, their children toddling nearby with baskets of sand. Civilization isn't just adults breaking their backs, it's entire families woven into the endless project of making stone mountains for dead kings. You wonder if anyone will build a pyramid for you. Spoiler, not a chance. Then comes the worst task. A rope slips, a block tilts, and everyone scrambles to stabilize it. You throw your weight against the rope, sand grinding between your toes, your heart hammering. For a breathless moment, you think the block will crush you flat. Somehow, with shouts and heaves, it steadies. The overseer snarls at the near disaster, but your knees still shake long after the danger passes. As the sun bleeds red across the horizon, you slump against the base of the pyramid, every muscle trembling. From this angle, the monument looks infinite, climbing towards stars that haven't even appeared yet. You realize you are a single drop in an ocean of laborers, each pouring sweat into stone, all so a pharaoh can nap in style for eternity. Civilization, you mutter, has one very cruel sense of humor. The sun is merciless, but the work doesn't stop. You've been moved to lighter duty, which is just ancient code for new ways to suffer. This time you're standing in a courtyard with jars of thick, questionable paste. A woman in a linen shift cheerfully informs you it's sunscreen. Except the recipe, equal parts oil, herbs, and, wait for it, crocodile dung. Yes, civilization's skincare line is off to a fragrant start. You smear the mixture on your arms, trying not to gag as the stench rises like a swamp on fire. Flies buzz instantly to your skin, delighted at this deluxe buffet. You swat them away, but they keep coming, probably confused whether you're a person or just another dung heap. Beside you, someone laughs and points out that at least the smell keeps the desert snakes away. You're not sure if that's a fact or just an ancient marketing campaign. Women apply the concoction more carefully, using carved ivory spoons to dab it across cheeks and shoulders. They even dust their skin afterward with crushed minerals to hide the stink. You look like you've bathed in bad guacamole, but at least your arms aren't burning under the relentless sun. Historians still argue whether these mixtures actually worked as sunscreen or if they were mostly symbolic protection. Either way, they've succeeded in making you the least dateable person in Egypt. Around you, the city bustles. Traders pass with baskets of onions and garlic, the staples of laborers' diets. Children chase each other through narrow alleys, laughing until a goat knocks over a clay water jar and everyone groans. Priests glide by in spotless linen, carrying incense burners that briefly mask your crocodile perfume. You envy their calm composure, knowing they've never pulled a limestone block in their lives. Later, you're dragged to work by the Nile, where men slather the same sunscreen on while preparing reed boats. The river gleams with crocodile's eyes just above the surface, and suddenly the dung in your ointment feels less like skincare and more like camouflage. A fisherman teases you by pointing at the water and whispering, "Maybe his cousin's looking for you." You clutch your rope net tighter and inch back from the riverbank. When the catch comes in, it's fish writhing in woven baskets, their scales glinting silver in the fading sun. The smell mingles with the tang of your sunscreen until you're not sure if you smell like a swamp, a kitchen, or both. A cat sneaks up, swiping a fish from the pile, earning curses from the fisherman. You laugh despite yourself. It's the one creature thriving in this mess, elegant and smug. Evening brings a different spectacle. Women gather at a mud-brick shrine, painting their eyes with thick coal while gossiping about temple festivals. One pulls you closer and jokes that your new cologne will ward off not only the sun but also potential friends. You roll your eyes, but admit she's right. The stench could empty a room faster than smoke. You retreat to the roof of a house where people gather to cool off in the breeze. The sky burns orange, then fades to indigo, stars puncturing the darkness. Your skin feels tacky, but not scorched. Maybe the dung did something after all, or maybe you've just gone nose blind. Either way, as you stretch sore muscles, you realize something. For all their oddities, these people have built routines of survival that somehow work. Civilization, it seems, is equal parts ingenuity and questionable fashion choices. And tonight, you'll sleep smelling like a swamp god, but at least you won't peel tomorrow. Morning arrives not with birdsong, but with the shout of a herald. You're hustled into Athens, where the streets are buzzing with chatter and the smell of grilled fish wafts from vendors' stalls. But you're not here for breakfast. You've been dragged into the gymnasium, and suddenly your aching back from pyramid duty feels like child's play. Welcome to the Greek obsession with exercise. The first thing you notice, everyone's naked. Well, almost everyone. Men of all ages stand under the colonnades, their skin glistening with olive oil, bodies lean from relentless training. You glance down at your own tunic and sandals, feeling overdressed and underprepared. A trainer in a russet cloak gestures for you to strip down, then tosses you a small flask of oil. Apparently, this is your new uniform, sheen and nothing else. You rub the oil on awkwardly, slipping more than shining, while the others laugh. You're ushered into the wrestling ring, a rectangle of packed sand where two men are already grappling, twisting like angry cats. Their bodies slam into the ground with a dull thud, and dust clouds rise around them. Someone explains the rules, though they sound more like suggestions. Pin your opponent, don't maim him, and try not to break anything important. Your turn comes faster than you'd like. You step into the ring, and within seconds you're on your back, staring up at the bright blue sky, wind knocked from your lungs. Historians still argue whether Greek athletics were primarily for training warriors or just a celebration of the human form. Either way, your ribs aren't impressed. You roll to the side, coughing, while your opponent grins and helps you up. A boy hands you a bronze strigil, a curved scraper for cleaning off sweat and oil. You drag it down your arm, flinching as dust and dead skin peel away. Not exactly a spa treatment, but it beats smelling like yesterday's crocodile dung. After wrestling comes running. The trainer claps his hands and suddenly you're sprinting barefoot on a dirt track under the punishing sun. Your feet slap the ground, your lungs burn, and you quickly realize you're the slowest of the group. One man breezes past you, hair tied in a neat knot, barely panting. You consider tripping him but decide you'd rather not get pummeled again. By the third lap, your vision blurs and you collapse in a heap. A passing dog sniffs you, decides you're boring and trots away. Inside the colonnade, musicians play flutes while philosophers debate. One man insists exercise sharpens the mind as well as the body. You'd argue, but right now you can't form words between gasps. The trainer pours water over your head, and you sputter as it runs into your nose. Someone jokes you look like a drowned goat, and honestly, you agree. In a corner of the gymnasium, youths practice discus and javelin. Bronze discs gleam as they arc through the air, landing with a satisfying thump. You're handed one and nearly drop it, heavier than it looks. You wind up, release, and watch your discus wobble like a dying bird before crashing into a basket of figs. Laughter erupts. You bow theatrically because at least humiliation is a skill you've mastered. As the day ends, the men recline on benches, chatting while attendants rub oil into sore muscles. You decline. Your skin is already slick enough to fry bread on. Instead, you sit in the shade, chewing olives and sipping watered wine. The gymnasium isn't just about sweat. It's a social hub, a place where friendships spark, rivalries flare, and reputations are built. You lean back, exhausted but oddly exhilarated. Civilization here is equal parts culture and chaos, and you're stuck in the middle, oily, bruised, and very aware you'll be sore tomorrow. No rest for you in Athens. The day after being slammed into sand and mocked for your discus throw, you're tugged by the elbow toward the agora, the open-air marketplace where democracy allegedly thrives. Allegedly, because what you're about to endure feels less like freedom and more like the world's longest group project. Welcome to the Athenian Assembly. You push through crowds of men in indigo and russet cloaks, the air thick with goat cheese, olives, and the smell of unwashed tunics. The stone steps of the Pnyx rise ahead, already crowded with citizens waving wax tablets and gesturing like actors on a stage. You find a seat, or more like a wedge of rock, and brace yourself. Because in Athens, politics is less quick meeting and more all-day marathon of speeches. A herald bangs a staff, and the first speaker strides forward, cloak billowing like he's auditioning for a play. He shouts about grain prices, naval defences, and some distant colony that owes tribute. The crowd cheers, boos, and heckles in equal measure. You clap when everyone else does, though you haven't the faintest idea what was just said. The man beside you leans in and whispers, "Terrible speaker," doesn't project from the diaphragm. You nod wisely, pretending you know what a diaphragm is. Then another speaker takes the platform, ranting about corruption in the silver mines. His voice drones on like a bee stuck in a jar, and your eyelids droop. Democracy, you realize, is powered less by ideals and more by patience. Historians still argue whether Athens' radical openness, where even commoners could speak, was true democracy or just an endless stage for loudmouths. Based on the snores echoing from the back row, you lean toward the latter. The sun climbs higher, and still the speeches pour on. A man with a magnificent beard insists Athens must build more triremes to keep Sparta in check. Another count urges that taxes are too high already. The crowd splits into factions, shouting over one another until it feels less like policy making and more like a food fight without the bread. You rub your temples, wishing someone would invent parliamentary time limits. Suddenly, a commotion. A citizen leaps up, waving a scroll, accusing a rival of bribery. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Two men nearly come to blows before being separated. You glance around nervously, half expecting someone to suggest gladiatorial combat just to speed things up. Instead, they vote, by raising hands, by shouting, sometimes by tossing pebbles into clay jars. The results are chaotic at best, yet somehow decisions emerge. A boy scurries through the crowd selling figs and watered wine. You buy some, chewing the sticky sweetness as the debate drags on. The sugar helps keep you awake, though nothing saves you from the droning of the next orator, who insists Athens must spend money beautifying the city with new temples. Half the crowd cheers, half groans, and you wonder if anyone will ever agree on anything. By late afternoon, you're slumped against the stone, head buzzing from sun, noise, and too many figs. A philosopher in a saffron cloak wanders by, muttering about justice and virtue. He pauses, looks at you, and declares, "The unexamined life is not worth living." You blink at him, too exhausted to argue, and think the unexamined nap sounds pretty great right now. As the assembly finally disperses, men argue their way down the hill, still debating taxes, ships, and philosophy. You trail behind, dazed and sunburnt, realizing that while Athens gave the world democracy, it also gave the world the first case of political burnout. Civilization here isn't just about freedom, it's about endurance, and if you thought pyramid hauling was tiring, try surviving a day of Athenian politics without dozing off. The shouting of Athenian politics fades behind you, but your respite doesn't last. A stern man in a crimson cloak grips your shoulder and declares you've been chosen for training. Before you can object, you're marched south to Sparta, a place where naps are outlawed, bread tastes like punishment, and childhood itself is an obstacle course. Welcome to the Spartan boot camp. Your first impression? Silence. Unlike bustling Athens, Sparta's streets are unnervingly quiet. Boys march in lines, bare feet slapping the dust, their eyes forward, faces grim. You're handed a bowl of black broth, a mix of pork, blood, vinegar, and salt. One sip and you gag, certain it tastes like despair. A boy next to you chuckles. You'll get used to it. You're not convinced. Training begins with a simple command: run. No sandals, no breakfast, just bare feet on gravel. You sprint across fields, lungs burning, stones slicing your soles. The boys around you don't complain. They compete, elbowing each other to be first. You trail behind, wishing for your Athenian figs. A trainer barks, "Faster or starve." And suddenly you're running like your next meal depends on it, because it literally does. The exercises are relentless. Wrestling, push-ups, spear drills with wooden shafts that feel heavier than iron. You're knocked down, hauled up, knocked down again. Your arms tremble, your knees scrape raw, but quitting isn't an option. A boy half your size flips you in the sand and smirks. You consider calling him a demon, but he's already sprinting to the next drill. Historians still argue whether Spartan discipline created unbeatable warriors or simply joyless citizens. Your aching body leans toward the latter. At midday, you're allowed a crust of bread. The catch? It's rationed to keep you hungry. Hunger, they claim, sharpens cunning, which is why, come nightfall, you're encouraged to steal food from in the kitchens. But if you're caught, the punishment is worse than starvation. You creep through the shadows, eyeing a hunk of goat cheese perched on a wicker tray. Just as your fingers close around it, a hand clamps your wrist. A trainer snarls and you're beaten with a rod. Not for stealing, but for failing to steal well. Civilization here redefines irony. Even resting is no comfort. You sleep on a mat of reeds you've cut yourself. No blankets, just a draft whistling through the barracks. The boy beside you snores, his face peaceful despite bruises from the day. You lie awake, sore, wondering if anyone here has ever smiled for reasons other than victory. The next dawn brings another round of pain. Wooden shields, heavy as millstones, are strapped to your arm. You're shoved into a phalanx formation, shoulder to shoulder with boys who glare like wolves. Together you march, sandals crunching gravel, spears leveled at an invisible enemy. The rhythm is hypnotic, step, thrust, sweat stings your eyes, but if you fall out of line, you'll feel the whip before the dust even settles. By evening, you're limping, bruised, half-starved, and oddly proud that you survived. A trainer nods approvingly, which in Sparta is the equivalent of a standing ovation. You realize their system isn't about comfort, it's about endurance, discipline, and stripping away anything soft. And while you'd trade your last loaf of bread for a nap in Athens, you have to admit the Spartans forged bodies like iron and spirits that rarely cracked. Too bad your own spirit feels more like cracked pottery. By the time you limp away from Sparta, you're convinced nothing could be harsher. Then a Roman centurion barks at you to fall in line, and suddenly you're part of a legion on the march. No debating, no oil slick workouts, just endless walking on stone roads designed to outlast your knees. Welcome to the Roman highway system, where blisters are inevitable and sandals are traitors. You strap on a pair of Caligae, hobnailed sandals that look sturdy until you realize the nails jab through the soles into your feet. Add to that a pack stuffed with rations, tools, and a rolled cloak, and you're carrying nearly 70 pounds. Your back groans in protest. The centurion, wearing polished armor that gleams like a mirror, snarls, "Move!" And so you march heel to toe, the rhythm pounding into your skull. Roman roads are marvels, though you're too busy suffering to admire them. Perfectly straight lines cut through forests, hills, and valleys, paved with layers of stone that bake under the sun. You tramp past milestones carved with Latin inscriptions. A fellow soldier explains that these roads stretch for thousands of miles, tying the empire together. You nod, then trip on a loose rock, nearly face-planting into his shield. He doesn't laugh. Romans take marching seriously. Midday brings no feast, only a ration of bread as hard as roof tiles. You gnaw at it, wishing for honey or even a fig, but settle for dipping it in sour wine. Soldiers call it posca, a mix of vinegar and water. You sip cautiously and nearly choke, sour enough to curl your tongue. Historians still argue whether posca was more refreshing or more punishment disguised as hydration. Either way, it makes you long for Athenian grapes and even Spartan broth. The march resumes. Your feet blister, your shoulders ache, and the sun hammers down like a blacksmith's mallet. A man beside you hums a marching tune, trying to lighten the mood. Another jokes that if you fall behind, the centurion will use your shield as firewood. You laugh weakly, then wince as a nail from your sandal bites deep into your heel. Civilization, you realize, doesn't care about comfort. It cares about reaching point B alive. Even the breaks are grueling. At camp, you're ordered to help dig a trench and set up palisades. Every night, a mini fortress rises, complete with ditches, stakes, and guard posts. You shovel dirt until your hands blister anew, then collapse onto your cloak, praying for sleep. Around the fire, veterans tell stories of roads leading all the way to Gaul, Britannia, even Africa. One brags he's marched 10,000 miles. You groan. You've barely survived 10. As the stars appear, the centurion inspects the camp. His gaze sweeps over the lines of tents, the straight roads gleaming in moonlight. He looks satisfied, which means tomorrow you'll march again, farther and faster. You close your eyes, listening to the distant sounds of wolves, and wonder if the empire is worth the souls you've already worn down. Roads may last for centuries, but you'll be lucky if your sandals last the week. Morning doesn't bring relief. Instead of marching, you're herded into the heart of a Roman city, where smoke drifts from tiled roofs and fountains burble in marble courtyards. Someone mutters that you've earned a rest at the bathhouse. Finally, you think, a break. What you don't realize is that Roman relaxation comes with as much sweat and noise as legion life, just without the sandals. The bathhouse looms like a palace, its facade carved with arches and statues. Inside, echoes bounce off vaulted ceilings painted with faded gods. You pay your entry fee with a handful of bronze coins and shuffle forward into a throng of naked men, slaves darting between them with buckets of water. The air is thick with steam, scented faintly with olive oil, smoke and gossip. You're already sweating before you step into the first room. It's the apoditerium, the changing hall. Except there are no lockers, just wooden shelves and hooks. You strip, tucking your tunic into a cubby, praying no one swipes it. A slave eyes your sandals a bit too long, and you glare. Shoes are precious. You'd sooner lose your dignity than those blister-making caligae. Then comes the frigidarium. You plunge into a pool of icy water, gasping as your skin tightens. Goosebumps ripple across your arms. Men laugh at your shiver, used to this ritual shock. One jokes that the cold keeps your Roman courage intact. You're not convinced. You feel more like a startled fish. Next is the tepidarium, a warm chamber where mosaics glitter under soft lamplight. The heat seeps into your bones, easing muscles sore from marching. You sigh with relief, but it's short-lived. The caldarium, the hot room, awaits. Steam envelops you, your skin prickles and sweat pours instantly. Slaves ladle water over glowing coals, hissing clouds rising like angry spirits. You sit on a marble bench, heart pounding, wondering how anyone calls this relaxing. Around you, men gossip loudly. Senators whisper about bribes. Merchants boast of trade ships. Soldiers complain about pay. You eavesdrop, fascinated. This is Rome's real forum, you realize, not the marble rostrum, but the steamy bathhouse, where business, politics, and scandals are exchanged as easily as bread. Historians still argue whether bathhouses were more hygienic marvels or just public rumour mills. Judging by the chatter around you, you'd vote rumour mill. A slave offers to scrape your skin with a strigil. You agree, and he drags the curved bronze tool across your oily arms. Dead skin and sweat peel away in grimy rolls. You wince, but admit it feels strangely refreshing. Another slave pours perfumed oil over your shoulders, massaging it in with surprising skill. For a moment, you almost forget your blisters. Then, of course, someone ruins it. A fat man beside you lets out a laugh and tells a bawdy joke about senators and goats. The chamber erupts in guffaws, steam swirling with sound. You chuckle politely, though you'd rather not imagine the goat. Finally, you return to the frigidarium, plunging into icy water once more. This time it feels cleansing, like your body is reborn, though your head still spins from heat and chatter. Emerging, you towel off with rough linen and reclaim your tunic, grateful it wasn't stolen. As you step back into the city streets, the evening air feels cool against your flushed skin. You should feel refreshed, but instead you're drained, sticky with oil, and carrying more gossip in your ears than peace in your heart. Civilization's idea of relaxation, it seems, is just another kind of endurance, less rope-pulling, more rumour-swallowing. And tomorrow, you're certain, some senator will give a speech about the scandal you overheard here today. Your so-called Roman rest day doesn't last. At dawn, you're shaken awake and shoved toward a training yard on the city's edge. The air smells of sweat, straw, and rusted iron. A grizzled trainer points to a rack of wooden swords, oversized planks shaped like blades, and barks, "Gladiator School." Suddenly, you'd give anything for another round in the steam bath. The wooden sword lands in your hand with a thud heavy enough to jolt your wrist. You swing it experimentally, nearly toppling over as the weight drags your arm down. Veterans laugh. "He's as graceful as a goat in sandals," one jeers. You grimace, planting your feet in the sandy yard. The trainer demonstrates. Step, thrust, shield block, repeat. You copy, awkwardly, the sword wobbling like a barn door in the wind. Within minutes your shoulders burn, your grip slips and blisters rise on your palms. The day unravels in drills. Wooden swords clash in a storm of dull thuds. Men grunt, shields splinter, sand sprays into your face. A larger trainee slams his shield into your chest and sends you sprawling. Dust fills your mouth, gritty as chalk. You stagger up, coughing, only to be knocked down again. This time you stay down a moment longer, staring at the blue sky framed by wooden palisades, wondering how long before the trainer calls you hopeless. Instead he roars, "Up!" So you rise. Again and again you're pummeled, shoved, ordered to block, thrust, advance. Sweat blinds you, and your arms feel like lead. Historians still argue whether gladiator schools were prisons or professional academies, but you're leaning toward torture chambers with tuition fees. At midday, a meal arrives. Barley porridge thick enough to stand a spoon in, accompanied by beans and a hunk of bread. Hardly luxurious, but it fills the pit in your stomach. A veteran across the table whispers that training meals are meant to bulk you up. Morty, skull for the arena, padding for the wounds. You glance at his scarred arms and wonder how many meals it took to earn them. The afternoon brings mock combat. You're paired with another trainee, both wielding wooden blades the size of fence posts. The crowd of your peers jeers, eager for blood, even if only sweat and splinters today. You circle, strike, miss, stumble. Your opponent clips your shin, and pain shoots up your leg. You yelp, more insult than injury, but the laughter stings worse than the blow. Somewhere beyond the yard, a roar rises, the real amphitheatre in session. You can hear the crowd chanting, the distant clang of steel, the muffled cry of combat. Your stomach knots. One day soon, the trainer tells you, you'll stand there instead of here, facing not a wooden sword, but a gladius sharpened for killing. You swallow hard, staring at the dusty ground, suddenly grateful for every minute the blade in your hand is still wood. Evening falls with one final drill. Running laps in full gear, you stagger around the yard, sweat dripping into your eyes, the wooden sword dragging like a log. When the trainer finally dismisses you, you collapse on a straw mat, every muscle trembling. Around you, the others boast, complain, or fall silent in exhaustion. The scent of oil lamps mingles with the tang of iron weapons stored in racks. You lie staring at the rafters, the faint cheer from the amphitheatre echoing in your ears. Civilization here doesn't just ask you to work, it demands you bleed for its entertainment. And as sleep creeps over your battered body, you realize the crowd's roar is already inside your head, haunting your dreams before you've even stepped into the arena. Morning breaks with a dry wind, and for once you're not in a dusty Roman yard. Instead, you're stumbling along a narrow trail, your feet crunching over gravel. A caravan stretches ahead, camels laden with bulging bundles of silk, spices, and strange goods from lands you can barely name. Welcome to the Silk Road, where every step feels longer than the last, and every merchant has an opinion louder than his camel. The sun rises like a bronze coin over the desert, heat shimmering off the horizon. You squint against the glare as a camel snorts beside you, its breath reeking of hay and yesterday's water. A boy in a saffron tunic tugs at the rope, urging the beast forward while singing a tune that sounds suspiciously like complaining set to music. You join the line, carrying nothing but your aching body and the vague hope of shade. The caravan is alive with colour. Merchants in indigo and russet robes argue over bolts of silk, their voices rising above the wind. Boxes clatter, jars rattle, and bells tied to camels jingle a rhythm that might drive you mad. One trader insists his cargo of cinnamon will fetch a fortune in Rome. Another claims jade carvings from China hold the power to heal fevers. Historians still argue whether the Silk Road was more about trade of goods or the spread of ideas. Right now, you're sure it's mostly about the spread of blisters. By midday, you stumble into an oasis. Palms sway lazily over a pool of water where camels kneel to drink. You fall to your knees and plunge your face into the coolness, gulping like a parched hound. The taste of clean water is heavenly, better than any Roman wine. Merchants set up shade cloths, unpack baskets, and chatter about exchange rates while you sprawl in the sand, half dead from the march. Lunch is simple. Dried apricots, flatbread, and strips of salted meat. The sweetness of fruit revives you, though a grain of sand grinds between your teeth with every bite. You glance around and notice slips of parchment being exchanged, letters, maps, even fragments of poetry. This isn't just a highway of camels and spices, it's a library on the move. The march resumes, now through rolling hills dotted with wildflowers. The scenery almost distracts you from the pain in your feet. Almost. A merchant laughs at your limp and offers to sell you camel sandals, guaranteed to last 1,000 miles. You're tempted until you remember you don't have a coin to your name. Civilization always finds a way to put a price tag on survival. By evening, the caravan halts at a dusty way station. The building is little more than mud walls and a smoky hearth, but it feels like a palace after the open trail. Camels are tethered, fires lit, and the smell of lentil stew fills the air. Traders recline on carpets, sipping tea from clay cups, their silhouettes flickering in lamplight. You sit nearby, too tired to eat much, just listening to their voices weave tales of distant empires, Rome, India, China, names that sound like dreams. The stars above blaze with impossible brightness, the Milky Way stretched like spilled flour across black velvet. You lie back, head on your arm, the cold desert air a sharp relief against your sunburned skin. Your body is sore, your lips cracked, but your mind spins with the thought, this road doesn't just connect places, it stitches the world together. You close your eyes, the camel bells still jingling in your ears, and drift into uneasy sleep, hoping tomorrow's path won't feel twice as long. The caravan moves on at dawn, but you're pulled aside at the next city gate. A stern official in a teal robe waves you into a stone hall filled with scrolls, ink pots, and men bent over bamboo slips. You've walked straight into the Han dynasty's pride and curse, the bureaucracy. And today, you're not marching, you're writing. The room smells of ink and damp wood. Rows of scholars in indigo and saffron robes hunch over desks, their brushes scratching furiously. You're handed a strip of bamboo, a pot of black ink, and a thin brush that looks deceptively delicate. A clerk instructs you to copy Confucian sayings from memory. Problem: you don't know them. Solution: you stare at your neighbour's work and try to mimic the brushstrokes without dripping ink all over yourself. Your hand cramps within minutes. The brush wobbles, smearing ink across the bamboo like a toddler's art project. The official scowls. Precision, he hisses, as though the fate of the empire depends on your handwriting. Maybe it does. This is paperwork as survival. Historians still argue whether these exams created meritocracy or just tortured generations of students. Judging by your cramped wrist, you'd say the latter. Around you, the scholars mutter Confucian passages. Filial piety is the root of virtue. And the gentleman is calm, the petty man always fretful. You feel seen, definitely the petty man today. A boy in saffron glances at your crooked characters and smirks. You glare back, ink blotting your sleeve, your dignity shrinking with each failed stroke. Midday arrives with a meagre meal, rice, cabbage, and weak tea. You wolf it down, wishing for a fig or a scrap of meat. Outside, merchants argue, roosters crow, and the world keeps spinning while you're trapped with ink and bamboo. Civilization, you realize, doesn't always demand muscle. It sometimes demands patience sharp enough to cut stone. To noon brings another ordeal, reciting passages aloud. You rise, throat dry, and stumble over words. The official sighs, unimpressed. Another student delivers his recitation flawlessly, his voice smooth as silk, earning nods of approval. You sit down again, cheeks burning, wishing you were hauling blocks in Egypt instead. At least Stone doesn't laugh at your accent. Later, an old scholar shows you a trick, dipping the brush lightly, holding it upright, letting the bristles glide like a bird across the page. You try, and for a fleeting moment, the character looks almost beautiful. The old man smiles faintly before returning to his work. A tiny victory, but a victory nonetheless. As dusk falls, the hall fills with lamplight, shadows flickering across the carved beams. The air grows heavy with ink fumes and muttered recitations. You set down your brush, hand aching, brain numb. Outside, you hear the clang of a blacksmith's hammer and envy him. At least his work leaves tangible results. Your bamboo slips, they'll vanish into archives buried under thousands of others. When the day ends, you stumble out into the cool night. Stars glimmer above the tiled roofs, and the city hums softly with carts and chatter. You've survived bureaucracy for one day, but barely. The truth hits you. In this civilization, strength isn't just measured in muscle. It's measured in how long you can endure boredom without setting your bamboo slip on fire. You wake to thick, wet air clinging to your skin. The sound of cicadas screeching from every tree. No desert, no dusty road. This time you're deep in the Maya lowlands, where the jungle hums like a living drum. Vines curl around stone temples, parrots squawk overhead, and the humidity turns your hair into something resembling swamp moss. Welcome to the Maya calendar countdown, where astronomy feels less like science and more like a sweaty marathon. You trudge up steep limestone steps, your tunic sticking to your back. At the top of the temple, a group of priests in teal and saffron cloaks are huddled around carved stelae. One raises a hand to the horizon where the sun is creeping upward. They chatter rapidly, pointing at shadow lines falling across the stones. You squint, but all you see is blinding light and more sweat dripping into your eyes. The priests argue in low voices, tracing glyphs etched deep into stone. They point at a bark paper codex, its pages covered in looping hieroglyphs of animals, stars, and gods. One insists an eclipse is coming, another swears it's months away. Historians still argue whether the Maya developed their calendar mainly for farming or for religious rituals. You just know your tunic is plastered to your chest like a second skin, and you'd rather they hurry up. Suddenly, a conch shell blows from the plaza below. People gather, farmers, traders, children clutching woven baskets of maize. The priests announce the day's rituals, their voices echoing through the jungle canopy. You can't follow half of it, but the crowd listens reverently. Everyone knows the calendar dictates not just planting and harvest, but festivals, sacrifices, and even wars. Civilization here runs on starlight and stone, measured in cycles far beyond your weary mind. The heat builds as the day stretches. You sit in the temple's thin shade, sipping at a gourd of cacao. Drink, bitter, spicy, nothing like modern chocolate. Your lips tingle, your throat burns, and you cough, earning a chuckle from a boy beside you. He gulps it down easily, smearing foam across his grin. You feel outclassed by a 12-year-old, again. Nearby, artisans chip new glyphs into a stone slab, dust rising with each tap. One carver jokes that if the priests argue much longer, they'll need a second slab just for today's debates. You laugh despite the sweat soaking your tunic because he's not wrong. The priests are still at it, gesturing wildly at the sun, the moon's pale outline, and lines carved in the temple floor. As dusk falls, torches flare across the plaza, their smoke mingling with jungle mist. The priests announce tomorrow's ceremony, a great festival to honor the gods of time. The crowd cheers, drums thunder, and dancers with feathered headdresses whirl in spirals of color. You clap along, though secretly you wonder how anyone has energy left to celebrate in this soup of air. When the stars emerge, dazzling and countless, you finally see why the priests obsess over them. The Milky Way arches across the sky like a silver serpent, bright enough to cast shadows. You lie back on the stone steps, head against your arm, listening to the drums below. Your muscles ache from climbing, your throat still burns from cacao, but you can't deny it. This civilization tracks the heavens with a precision that feels both terrifying and beautiful. And you're just hoping tomorrow doesn't involve more stairs. Your wish for no more stairs is granted, but not in the way you hoped. At dawn, you're shoved toward a massive stone court ringed with steep walls and looming stone hoops perched high above the ground. This, you're told, is the Maya ball game. You glance at the rubber ball resting on the court floor, heavy, black, and glistening like a lump of tar, and realize quickly this is not soccer. Players stride onto the court wearing padded belts, feathered helmets, and knee guards. Their tunics are dyed indigo and saffron, bright against the pale limestone. The crowd gathers on terraces, baskets of maize and gourds of cacao in hand, buzzing with excitement. You're pushed onto the court, utterly unprepared, and handed nothing. That's because you're not allowed to touch the ball with your hands or feet. Only hips, elbows, and knees. Perfect. The whistle blows, a sharp blast on a conch shell, and the ball is hurled into play. It bounces with alarming force, slamming into the limestone and ricocheting into your thigh. The impact nearly knocks you flat. The crowd roars with laughter. Your opponent, grinning ear to ear, bumps it neatly off his hip, sending it arcing high toward the hoop. It misses, crashing to the floor with a thud that echoes through your bones. You hobble after it, already limping. Minutes in, you're drenched in sweat. The rubber ball is heavy, stubborn, and seems to seek you out like a curse. You fling yourself sideways, trying to bump it with your hip, but it ricochets into your ribs instead. You collapse in the dust, wheezing. A teammate shouts, "Get up!" You stagger upright, certain you now know what it feels like to be tackled by a boulder. Historians still argue whether the losers of this game were sacrificed to the gods, or whether that's more myth than reality. Standing here gasping and bruised, you decide the sacrifice might actually be a mercy compass. Red to playing another round, the ball smashes into your knee, and you bite back a curse, hopping on one leg while the crowd howls with glee. The game surges on. Skilled players launch the ball skyward, aiming for the stone hoop perched impossibly high. Each near miss draws groans from the audience. Each successful strike sends the terraces into a frenzy. You, meanwhile, are reduced to flailing like a drunken goat, managing only to keep the ball from knocking out your teeth. When at last it brushes past your hip and rolls harmlessly away, you raise your arms in mock triumph. The crowd laughs again, but this time you laugh with them. As the sun dips low, shadows stretch across the court. The match ends with one team victorious, the other defeated, and you, sprawled in the dust, too sore to care which side you were on. The victors strut, feathers glinting in torchlight, while musicians strike drums and flutes in celebration. You drag yourself to the sidelines where someone hands you a cup of bitter cacao. You gulp it, grimacing, but at least it hides the taste of humiliation. Later, as the crowd disperses, you sit alone on the edge of the stone court. Fireflies flicker in the humid dusk, the jungle alive with chirps and croaks. Your body throbs from head to toe, but your mind hums with awe. For these people, the ball game isn't just sport, it's ritual, community, even a kind of cosmic theatre. And for you, it's another reminder that civilization can turn even playtime into something that leaves you crawling home. The jungle fades behind you, and the air shifts. No more sticky humidity, but a raw, salty wind that lashes your face. You're on the deck of a longship now, surrounded by burly figures with braided beards and cloaks dyed russet and indigo. The carved dragon prow snarls at the waves ahead, and the oars creak like groaning giants. Welcome to the Viking seas, where your survival hinges on the strength of your arms and the mercy of the weather. "Row!" bellows the steersman, and 30 men dip oars in unison. You hesitate, then grab one yourself, only to find it heavier than any wooden sword or farming tool you've ever touched. You heave it forward, the motion jerking your shoulders like they're being wrenched from their sockets. The man beside you, broad as an ox, grins and shouts, "Keep up or the sea takes you." Comforting. Salt spray stings your eyes as waves slap against the hull. Your hands blister almost immediately, palms roar against the rough wood. The rhythm of rowing is hypnotic. Pull, heave, groan, splash. Hours stretch into eternity. Your back knots, your thighs burn, and the cold air whips through your tunic. You're no warrior, you're ballast with blisters. A gull screeches overhead, swooping low before disappearing into grey clouds. One sailor mutters it's a good omen, another spits and swears it's bad. Historians still argue whether Vikings truly read omens at sea or just bickered endlessly to pass the time. You lean toward the latter, especially when the same men immediately start debating whose axe is sharper. At midday, a horn sounds and the oars lift dripping from the sea. You sag in relief as salted fish is passed around. It's tough, chewy, and tastes like ocean-soaked leather, but hunger makes it edible. You chew, teeth aching, while men swap tales of raids in far-off lands, golden crosses snatched from churches, jeweled chalices hidden in sacks of gras. You try to look impressed, though your main concern is whether you'll survive this boat ride without vomiting. The respite ends quickly. "Row!" comes the order again, and the oars plunge back into the grey water. This time your rhythm falters and your oar smacks against the one in front. The man across from you curses, showering you with spittle. You mutter an apology, but he only laughs, amused by your incompetence. For Vikings, weakness is entertainment. By late afternoon, a storm looms. Black clouds swallow the horizon and rain lashes the deck. The ship bucks and rolls, oars splintering against crashing waves. You cling desperately, knuckles white, praying you won't be tossed overboard like driftwood. The steersman howls commands while men chant to keep rhythm. Voices roar against the storm. You row blindly, arms burning, terrified of letting go. When the storm finally passes, the world feels eerily calm. The sea gleams silver under a pale sun, the dragon prow dripping seawater. Exhausted, you slump over your oar, every muscle trembling. The men laugh, slap your back, and toss you another strip of fish as if this torment was just another Tuesday. As night falls, you lie on the damp planks, waves slapping the hull, stars glittering above like cold fire. You're sore, soaked, and smelling like rotten herring. Yet the longship cuts forward, steady and unstoppable, a wooden arrow aimed at the unknown. Civilization here isn't about comfort, it's about endurance, plunder, and singing loud enough that the sea itself listens. You close your eyes, humming along with the rowers' chant, praying tomorrow brings calmer waters, or at least thicker gloves. When the longship finally noses into shore, you think you're saved. No more rowing, no more salt stinging your eyes. Instead, you're herded into a timber settlement where smoke pours from low-roofed longhouses. You duck inside one and instantly choke on the haze. Welcome to the Norse village, where home life is as smoky as the sea was stormy. The interior is dim, lit only by a central fire pit and a few guttering oil lamps. Smoke curls upward, but has nowhere to go. There's a hole in the roof, but it's too small for the torrent spilling from the flames. Your eyes water, your throat burns, and you cough loud enough to earn a glare from an old woman stirring a cauldron. She mutters something that probably translates to soft outsider. The longhouse is crowded. Families sleep side by side on benches covered in furs. Chickens wander freely, pecking at crumbs. Fish stew bubbles in the cauldron, filling the room with a pungent aroma, half comfort, half punishment. You're handed a wooden bowl, the broth greasy and flecked with dill. You sip, wincing at the heat, then blow on it, earning a chuckle from a boy gnawing a smoked herring. Conversation buzzes in the smoky gloom. A man boasts of raiding across the sea, showing off a silver cross dangling from his neck. Another sharpens an axe, sparks spitting into the straw-strewn floor, and no one seems worried about fire. Children wrestle, tumbling dangerously close to the flames. You edge away, clutching your bowl. Historians still argue whether Norse homes were primarily communal halls or sprawling farmsteads. Tonight, at least, this one feels like a barn that accidentally swallowed a family reunion. When night falls, the longhouse grows even noisier. Skalds, poets, begin reciting sagas, their voices rising above the crackle of the fire. They chant of Odin's wisdom, Thor's hammer, and voyages to lands where the sun barely sets. The crowd drinks mead from horn cups, passing them around without pause. You sip once and cough. The honey wine burns sweet and sharp. The man next to you laughs and claps your back hard enough to rattle your teeth. As the tales grow louder, so does the smoke. Your lungs ache. You lie down on a bench covered in rough furs, trying to breathe shallowly. Above, beams creak in the wind and smoke curls like grey ghosts. A baby wails, a dog barks, the stew bubbles endlessly. Civilization here is no quiet refuge. It's a furnace where family, animals, and legends all stew together in one long, smoky night. Before dawn, you're shaken awake. The fire has burned low, but the air is still thick with haze. Someone thrusts a piece of dried fish into your hand and gestures toward the door. You stumble outside, gasping in the cold air, lungs finally free. The frost bites your nose, but it feels cleaner than anything inside. Behind you, the longhouse smoulders like a dragon's den, smoke still pouring from the roof hole. You can't help but laugh. A smoky home is better than none at all, but you'd trade half a saga for a window that opens. The crisp northern air fades, and before long you're standing in a muddy field, wooden hoe in hand, back already protesting. Welcome to medieval Europe, not in the castles or the feasting halls, but down here with the peasants where life is one long wrestle with dirt. The sun rises pale and weak, casting mist over furrows of half-tilled earth. You join other villagers, most in rough wool tunics of indigo or russet, their hands as calloused as old leather. A bell tolls from a distant church tower, announcing the start of another day of work. Not that you needed a reminder, your aching body knew already. Your job is simple: hoe, sow, repeat. You jab at the soil, trying to loosen clumps of earth stubborn as stone. Seeds scatter from a sack slung at your hip, bouncing into shallow furrows. Behind you, a boy drives an ox-drawn plough, the beast snorting clouds of steam in the morning chill. The plough blade cuts clean lines, but you're the one bent double, covering seeds with your hoe, sweat dripping despite the cold. By mid-morning, your back feels like it's folding in half. A neighbour hands you a crust of bread and a sliver of onion. Breakfast. You chew slowly, wishing for figs, olives, or even Viking fish stew. Instead, your jaw works through tough crust, and your eyes water from the onion's sharp bite. A jug of ale is passed around, watery, sour, but safer than the well water. You drink, then cough as a fly swims across your lips. The peasants laugh. You grimace. Taxes loom over the day's work. A man in a saffron hood reminds everyone that part of today's harvest belongs to the Lord, part to the church, and part to the king. You glance at your sack and realize what's left for your family is barely enough to survive. Civilization's generosity, a lifetime of labor traded for scraps. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly downtrodden serfs or had more freedom than we imagine. As your shoulders scream under the hoe, you lean toward downtrodden. At midday, you pause in the shade of a crooked oak. Children chase geese through the mud, shrieking with laughter. A dog darts after them, sending feathers flying. For a moment the misery softens. The rhythm of work, food, and family knits people together. But the bell tolls again, and everyone sighs, shoulders sagging as hoes and ploughs return to their furrows. Afternoon stretches long. Clouds gather, threatening rain, but you keep working. A woman nearby sings a plaintive ballad about lost love, her voice rising above the clank of tools. Another tells a joke about a lazy priest who blesses his wine more than his parish. The laughter, brief but warm, makes the mud feel lighter under your feet. By dusk, the sky glows orange and the fields glisten with damp furrows. Your body aches in every joint. You stagger toward a cottage of wattle and daub, smoke curling from its thatched roof. Inside, stew simmers, a thin broth of turnips, cabbage, and barley. You eat slowly, the warmth seeping into your bones. Around you, villagers share bread, gossip, and weary smiles. When night falls, you stretch out on a straw mattress crawling with fleas. Your eyelids droop as the fire dies to embers. Civilization here is no feast. It's mud, toil, and turnips. But it's also laughter in the fields, song over furrows, and children chasing geese until stars prick the sky. You groan softly, half asleep, and pray tomorrow's soil will at least be softer on your back. If you thought peasant life was hard, try stepping into 60 pounds of steel. The lord of the manor has decided today is training day, which means you're stuffed into armor that feels more like a personal oven than protection. Welcome to knighthood, or rather the heavy, clanking nightmare of pretending to be one. First comes the gambeson, a quilted undertunic that smells faintly of mildew and old sweat. Over that, the squire straps on chainmail, each ring tugging at your shoulders like a bag of wet stones. You groan, but he isn't finished. Plate greaves clamp around your legs, vambraces bind your arms, and finally the breastplate slams against your chest with a metallic thud. By the time the helmet is lowered over your head, your vision is narrowed to a slit and your ears are full of echoes. Breathing feels like shouting inside a barrel. You take one step and nearly topple. Another step and your knee cracks loudly, not from the armor, but from you. A fellow knight in training chuckles, clanking past with ease. "You'll get used to it," he says. You're not convinced. You feel like a roast chicken wrapped in iron. Training begins in the tilt yard. A wooden lance is shoved into your hand. It's longer than a tree branch and about as unwieldy. You mount a horse clad in teal barding, its sides gleaming in the sun. The poor beast snorts, clearly unimpressed with the idea of carrying an iron-clad novice. A squire smacks its flank, and suddenly you're galloping toward a straw target. The lance wobbles, your teeth rattle, and you miss completely, driving the weapon into the dirt. The crowd of onlookers bursts into laughter. You slump, praying no one recorded this on parchment. Historians still argue whether knights were truly noble warriors or just heavily armed thugs. From your vantage point, wobbling in armor that could drown you in a shallow puddle, the answer leans toward the walking anvils with titles. After a humiliating joust, you're ordered to spar on foot. Sword in hand, shield on arm, you shuffle forward. Every movement feels like trudging through molasses. Your opponent, a smug teenager who's clearly been doing this since he could walk, slams his wooden blade against your shield, rattling your bones. You try to swing back, but the sword barely lifts. He taps your helmet with the flat of his blade, clanging so loud your ears ring. The squires snicker. By midday, you're drenched in sweat, your linen shirt soaked beneath the armor. You stagger to a bench where servants bring you bread and watered wine. You wolf it down, crumbs sticking to your lips while trying to cool off. Removing the armor takes longer than donning it. The squire unbuckles straps with deliberate slowness, clearly enjoying your suffering. Afternoon drills resume with archery practice. At least here you can breathe, though the longbow strains your arms after a few shots. Arrows thunk into straw but rarely near the painted target. Beside you, another trainee lands 3 in the bullseye and grins smugly. You mutter that you were aiming for intimidation. No one believes you. As the sun sets, the tilt yard empties. Knights in training joke, polish armor, and boast about future tournaments. You collapse onto the grass, every limb aching, your tunic plastered to your body with sweat. You realize knighthood isn't gallant quests or ballads sung by minstrels. It's sweat, bruises, and armor rash in unmentionable places. Civilization has traded turnip toil for steel cages, and you're not sure which is worse. At least in the fields you could bend over without falling on your face. After the misery of armor, you're finally allowed indoors, though indoors in a castle is less comfort and more drafty stone labyrinth. You shuffle through echoing halls, torches flickering against tapestries that smell faintly of mildew. The air is cold enough to nip at your nose, yet somehow still carries the unmistakable tang of chamber pots. Welcome to life behind castle walls, where the glamour of royalty dissolves into echoes, smells, and gossip. A servant in a russet tunic hurries past you with an iron bucket sloshing ominously. He mutters apologies and ducks into a side passage, leaving a trail of odour strong enough to wake the dead. You pinch your nose and realize castles didn't have plumbing. Chamber pots are carried, often sloshed and emptied into cesspits or straight out the window. Civilization's fortress of luxury comes with rivers of reality. You climb a spiral stair, the stones cold underfoot, until you reach the great hall. Long wooden tables stretch beneath a high timber roof. A fire blazes in the central hearth, smoke escaping through a hole in the ceiling, most of it anyway. Servants bustle about, setting trenchers of bread and platters of meat. At the far end, a minstrel tunes a lute, plucking out a tune that blends with the roar of dogs chasing scraps underfoot. You sit at a bench, squeezed between 2 men who immediately launch into gossip. One whispers about the lord's new hunting hounds. The other insists the lady of the castle spends more time with the chaplain than with her husband. You chew on a slice of bread, the edges hard as wood, and sip ale that tastes faintly of smoke. Historians still argue whether castles were truly centres of refined culture or just fortified farmhouses with better decor. Judging by the noise, smells and rumours, you'd cast your vote for the latter. Suddenly, trumpets sound. The lord enters, cloak of indigo, trimmed with fur, his steps echoing on the flagstones. Everyone rises, then sits again as he gestures. Dinner begins. Platters of roasted fowl, venison, and root vegetables circulate down the table. You dig in, grateful for real meat, even if it's greasy and lukewarm by the time it reaches you. Knives scrape, mugs clank, and laughter bounces off the stone walls. Between bites, entertainment unfolds. A jester capers in saffron tights, bells jingling as he tumbles. He tells a joke about monks and sheep that earns roars of laughter. You laugh too, though mostly to hide your confusion. A troop of servants parades in with more wine, their arms trembling under heavy pitchers. One nearly trips, splashing a knight's tunic. The knight curses, and suddenly the gossipers beside you have fresh material. As the meal drags on, the heat from the central hearth doesn't quite reach your corner. You shiver, tugging your cloak tighter, even while sweat beads on your brow from the noise and smoke. The mingling scents of roasting meat, spilled ale, and chamber pots seeping from some hidden corridor churn your stomach. Civilization here is less about comfort and more about spectacle, keeping up appearances while servants scurry with buckets in the shadows. By the time the feast winds down, you're dazed, stuffed with bread and overwhelmed by chatter. You wander back to your straw pallet in a side chamber. where drafts whistle through arrow slits. Wrapping yourself in a thin blanket, you stare at the flickering shadows on the stone wall. The castle may stand tall against sieges, but against cold, stench and gossip, its defences crumble quickly. You close your eyes, half dreaming of peasants' cottages, fleas and all. At least there the gossip was quieter. Dawn in the castle barely filters through narrow arrow slits, but you're already being nudged toward yet another duty. Not the tilt yard, not the great hall. This time you're led to a monastery tucked just outside the castle walls. The stone building looms quiet, cloaked in morning mist. You step inside, and silence swallows you whole. Welcome to the monk's routine, where the days stretch endlessly, broken only by chants, bread crusts, and the occasional ink blot. The air is chill, scented faintly of beeswax and damp stone. Hooded figures in indigo habits shuffle through cloisters, their sandals whispering against the flagstones. A bell tolls deep and resonant, calling everyone to the chapel. You follow, seating yourself on a hard wooden bench. The chanting begins, a low, droning hum that vibrates through your bones. The words are in Latin, which you don't understand, but the rhythm is steady, hypnotic. Within minutes, your head lolls, only to snap up again when a monk gives you a sharp glance. The service ends, but silence continues. Meals are eaten wordlessly in the refectory, coarse bread, thin vegetable broth, and a cup of watered ale. You sit among rows of bowed heads, chewing slowly. A monk gestures toward a painted panel on the wall, its images of saints, reminding everyone that this meagre feast is meant to nourish the soul, not the stomach. Your stomach grumbles loudly in reply. Afterward, you're sent to the scriptorium. The room glows with pale light from narrow windows, illuminating rows of desks. Monks bend over parchment, quills scratching steadily. You're handed a reed pen and told to copy a passage. The ink blotches immediately, leaving a messy stain. You curse under your breath, quietly, but apparently not quietly enough. A stern brother glares, pressing a finger to his lips. You nod sheepishly and keep scribbling. Historians still argue whether monastery preserved knowledge or hoarded it, but as your cramped hand scratches out yet another crooked letter, you're certain the monks at least preserved your misery. Hours crawl by. Your back stiffens, your eyes blur from squinting at tiny script. You take a break to stretch and accidentally tip an inkpot, sending black rivulets across the parchment. The gasp that escapes your lips is louder than any prayer. You scramble to blot the mess with scraps of cloth, but the damage is done. Another brother sighs, muttering something about the careless hand. You sink lower in your chair, wishing for a straw field instead of this prison of parchment. Evening brings another round of chanting. The chapel fills with flickering candlelight, shadows swaying against the stone arches. The voices rise and fall, weaving like waves in a dark sea. The sound is strangely soothing, though your knees ache from kneeling on hard stone. For a moment, you almost drift into peace. Almost. Then a monk behind you snores mid-chant, and the spell shatters with stifled laughter. At night, you lie on a wooden cot stuffed with straw, the chill seeping through thin blankets. The silence is heavier than armor, broken only by the faint rustle of robes as monks shift in their sleep. You stare at the beams overhead, realizing this life is built on patience and repetition, discipline without swords, silence without joy. Civilization here seeks the eternal, but you just want a decent pillow and a snack that isn't bread crust. The monk's silence fades behind you, and before you know it, dust is choking your throat again. This time it's not fields or pyramids, it's the Persian royal road, a ribbon of stone and dirt stretching farther than your imagination. Messengers gallop past on sleek horses, their cloaks snapping in the wind. You, however, are on foot, trudging with the pace of a mule that lost the will to live. Welcome to the road that binds an empire together, though right now it's binding your blisters more tightly than your sandals. The sun glares overhead, baking the road into a shimmering ribbon. You shuffle past way stations, low mud brick inns with water troughs and tethered horses. The scent of sweat, leather, and manure hangs heavy in the air. Couriers thunder in and out, switching horses with practiced speed. Their messages are sealed with wax, urgent dispatches destined for Susa or Sardis. One smirks at you as he passes, shouting, "I'll be in the next city before you reach the gate." You cough on his dust. The road itself is remarkable. Straight, paved in sections wide enough for armies to march. Traders lead donkeys laden with carpets, jars of wine, and baskets of dates. You weave between them, dodging a wagon that squeaks so loudly you consider throwing yourself into the ditch. A guard in a teal robe eyes you suspiciously, his spear glinting in the light. You clutch your meager bundle tighter, hoping you don't look like a bandit. By midday, your feet are on fire. You pause at a way station, gulping water from a clay jug. It's lukewarm, but it saves you from collapsing. A weary innkeeper offers flatbread and goat cheese in exchange for a copper coin you don't have. You mutter thanks and stagger back onto the road, stomach growling louder than a camel. Historians still argue whether the Royal Road was built primarily for trade or for military control. Judging by the number of guards barking at you to move faster, you'd say both. Afternoon drags. Dust swirls with every step, coating your tongue until all you taste is grit. A boy herding goats laughs at your limp, calling you slower than his grandmother. You try to respond, but your voice cracks like dry reeds. Another courier passes, shouting, "Neither snow nor rain nor heat." You mutter, "Nor sanity," under your breath. As the sun dips, the horizon blazes orange. Shadows stretch long across the road, and you think you glimpse mountains in the distance. The thought of reaching them gives you just enough strength to keep going. Travelers gather at another way station, merchants lighting fires, guards setting up camp, storytellers already spinning tales of kings and battles. You collapse near the flames, gnawing on a scrap of bread someone takes pity on you with. The night sky blooms with stars, countless and sharp against the black. You lie back on your cloak, feet throbbing, ears still full of hooves pounding the road. Civilization here isn't just about building empires, it's about stitching them together, one dusty step at a time. You drift into sleep with a bitter laugh. The king's message may reach its destination by dawn, but your blistered feet will still be in the same ditch. The royal road fades behind you, and soon you find yourself walking under the canopy of ancient oaks. The air smells of moss and damp soil, and shafts of light cut through the branches like spears of gold. Ahead, cloaked figures stand in a circle, their hoods teal and saffron, their staffs carved with spirals and runes. You've stumbled into the world of the Celtic druids, and suddenly the blisters on your feet seem like the least of your problems. They beckon you closer. You step into the grove, where the ground is carpeted with fallen leaves, damp and fragrant. At the centre lies a flat stone covered in strange carvings that look like stars, rivers, and creatures all at once. The druids chant in low voices, words you don't recognize but feel rumbling in your chest. A torch flares, smoke curling into the canopy. You shift nervously, wondering if they'll ask for a goat, or worse, for you. One druid hands you a branch of mistletoe, freshly cut with a golden sickle. You hold it awkwardly, unsure whether to wave it, sniff it, or run. The man beside you chuckles softly, eyes glinting in the firelight. "It's sacred," he whispers. "Don't drop it." "Great. No pressure." Nearby, apprentices recite endless memorized passages, their voices overlapping. They don't write things down, preferring memory over parchment. You marvel at the sheer volume of words spilling from their mouths, myths, laws, star charts, even herbal remedies. Historians still argue whether druids were primarily priests, judges, or political advisors. Judging by this forest classroom, they were all three, and relentless teachers to boot. You're ushered to sit on a fallen log as the druids debate an omen. A raven croaks overhead, and instantly the circle splits into whispers. Some say it's a sign of war, others insist it's prosperity. You clear your throat to offer maybe it's just a bird, but wisely keep quiet. It's when a druid fixes you with a stare sharp enough to slice stone. As the sun sinks lower, the ceremony shifts. A carved cauldron is filled with water from a nearby stream, its surface shimmering in the torchlight. One druid dips a hand in and sprinkles droplets over the crowd. The cold splash hits your face, startling but strangely refreshing after the dust of the road. A woman hums softly, weaving flowers into a crown that she places on the stone altar. Night gathers. The grove glows with torchlight, shadows flickering across bark like painted spirits. The chanting rises, weaving with the rustle of leaves, the hoot of an owl, the crackle of the fire. You close your eyes and almost feel the forest breathing with you. Civilization here isn't stone roads or castles. It's trees, voices, and rituals older than iron. By the time the ceremony ends, the stars burn overhead, bright between the branches. The druids slip away into the darkness, their cloaks vanishing like mist. You sit alone on the damp earth, ears ringing with chants, mistletoe branch still clutched in your hand. For once, you don't know if you've survived a hardship or been drafted into something stranger. Either way, you're certain tomorrow will not involve a quiet nap. The oak grove fades into mist, and when it clears, you're gasping thin air on a mountain path. The world has tilted upward, and every breath feels like sucking through a straw. Welcome to the Andes, home of the Inca, where trails coil around cliffs like stone serpents and your legs tremble long before the llamas do. The sun is brilliant here, bouncing off snowcaps that pierce the sky. You tug your cloak tighter, though sweat still trickles under your tunic. A caravan stretches ahead, men in russet and indigo tunics, llamas laden with baskets of maize, potatoes and coca leaves. The animals glance back at you with smug expressions, their hooves steady on paths no wider than a dinner table. One slips a little, pebbles tumbling into the abyss below, and your stomach flips. You hug the cliff face, promising the gods you'll never complain about flat roads again. The trail zigzags mercilessly. You stumble, lungs burning, each step heavier than the last. A boy half your size trots past carrying a bundle of firewood. You groan, leaning on your knees, and he laughs before vanishing around a bend. Historians still argue whether Inca runners, the Chasquis, truly covered hundreds of miles in days, or if the legends exaggerate. Watching these mountain-born kids skip along ridges, you believe every word. At midday, the caravan pauses in a high meadow. Women unwrap cloth bundles revealing roasted guinea pig, corn cakes and spicy sauces. You're offered a coca leaf to chew. It numbs your tongue, lifts the fog from your head, and makes your heart beat steadier. You chew gratefully, though you can't shake the thought that you're basically snacking on mountain medicine. The locals grin, teeth green, clearly used to it. As the rest eat, a priest in a saffron cloak sprinkles chicha beer onto the ground, murmuring thanks to Pachamama, the Earth Mother. Everyone bows their heads, you me, them feeling the solemnity of the moment. Civilization here is woven from stone and sky, from gratitude for the earth that both feeds and punishes. The journey resumes. Clouds roll in, cloaking the path in mist so thick you can't see your feet. The llamas hum softly, their shadows ghost-like in the fog. Your breath rasps, your chest tightens, and you stumble again. A man offers his hand, pulling you up with ease. His skin is weathered, his eyes calm. He pats your shoulder as if to say, "You'll live, probably." By dusk, you reach a tampu, an Inca way station built of stone, with walls tight enough to keep out the mountain winds. Fires flicker, smoke curling into the icy air. You collapse onto a mat, exhausted beyond words, as musicians pluck panpipes, the notes rising thin and sweet against the mountainside. The llamas settle outside, their silhouettes sharp against the snow-lit peaks. You stare upward at a sky so clear it looks carved from crystal. Stars pulse like fire, the Milky Way bending in a glittering arc above the Andes. Your body aches, your lungs still sting, but you can't help marveling. Civilization here isn't cushioned by luxury. It's chiseled into cliffs, carried on backs, and sung into the night air. You close your eyes, humming with the panpipes, and hope tomorrow's path leads downhill for once. Morning in the Andes greets you not with a gentle breeze, but with another uphill climb. The tampu fades behind, and soon you're trudging along terraces carved straight into the mountainside. These steps of earth are feats of engineering, green ledges stacked one above the other, clinging to cliffs like shelves in the sky. Welcome to Inca terrace farming, where the only thing heavier than the baskets are your size. Farmers in indigo and russet tunics bend low, their hands deep in soil rich with centuries of ash and compost. They move methodically, dropping potato cuttings into neat rows. Children scamper between terraces, carrying wicker baskets filled with seed tubers. One girl laughs as she balances a basket bigger than her torso, skipping along the edge with the agility of a mountain goat. You, on the other hand, nearly trip just trying to stand upright. A man thrusts a rope basket into your arms. It's full of stones, meant to reinforce a terrace wall. You stagger up a narrow stairway, the basket cutting into your shoulders. Each step feels like climbing the world itself. At the top, you dump the load into a gap, panting, while another farmer pats the stones into place. Civilization here isn't just feeding mouths, it's literally reshaping mountains. Historians still argue whether terrace farming was primarily about feeding millions or controlling erosion. Either way, your calves are voting for erosion control. By midday, the sun blazes, bouncing off stone walls until your skin prickles. Farmers pause to chew coca leaves, passing them with casual generosity. You accept one, the bitter taste making your tongue curl. Soon, though, the fatigue eases slightly, and you find yourself hauling baskets again with fewer curses. Perhaps this is the ancient version of an energy drink, though far leafier. Lunch is roasted corn and a sip of chicha beer, the froth bubbling as it's poured into clay cups. You eat sitting on a terrace wall, legs dangling over dizzying drops, watching hawks circle below. The view is breathtaking, equal parts beauty and terror. You mutter a prayer that the wall doesn't crumble, because the fall would be longer than your lifespan deserves. Afternoon brings irrigation duty. Channels carved into the mountains divert glacier water into the terraces, trickling down from level to level. You're handed a wooden shovel to clear debris from a canal. The water is icy, numbing your hands instantly, but you push stones aside, letting the stream flow freely. Children cheer as water gushes into their rows of potatoes, their bare feet splashing joyfully. You envy their energy. As dusk settles, the terraces glow golden, every step shimmering like stairways to the sun. Farmers gather their tools, shoulders slumped but smiles on their faces. A man plucks a quina flute, soft notes drifting with the wind. You sit on a stone wall, body aching but heart oddly warmed. Civilization here isn't built on marble or iron, it's carved into mountains, stitched into soil and carried in baskets by calloused hands. Night descends quickly in the Andes. Stars bloom overhead, fierce and brilliant. You lie back on a woven blanket, the earth still warm beneath you, the terraces stretching away into the dark. Your muscles throb, but the sound of laughter and flute music lulls you. Tomorrow, more baskets await. But for now, you drift into sleep, one weary farmer among the clouds. The chill of the Andes fades, replaced by the rhythmic stamp of boots on stone. You're no longer climbing terraces. You're standing in the heart of the Ottoman Empire, swept into the training ground of the Janissaries. Lines of young men in teal and saffron uniforms march in perfect unison, muskets gleaming in the sun. A sergeant's voice cuts the air like a blade. Step together. You shuffle to join them, but your timing is off by half a beat, and the man beside you scowls. Welcome to the drill yard where precision matters more than breath. The ground trembles as hundreds of boots strike at once. Dust rises, clinging to your tunic and stinging your throat. You struggle to match their rhythm, left, right, left, while your calves burn. Behind you, drummers pound enormous kettle drums, their booming rhythm drilling the pace into your bones whether you like it or not. Soon comes musket drill. A weapon is shoved into your arms, heavier than you expect. The sergeant shouts commands, "Raise, aim, fire!" You fumble with the powder horn, spilling black dust on your sleeve. The veteran next to you glares, muttering that if you can't load faster, you'll be dead before battle even begins. You nod meekly, trying again, hands shaking. At last the musket roars, smoke choking your lungs, ears ringing like church bells. Historians still argue whether the Janissaries were elite protectors of the Sultan or simply enslaved boys turned into soldiers. Standing here, coughing in the gun smoke, you'd call them both. Discipline radiates from every movement, bows to commanders, polished boots, weapons spotless. You, however, look like a scarecrow who wandered into the wrong parade. By midday, you're drilled on obedience. The sergeant shouts contradictory orders. Turn left, no, right, kneel, stand, just to see who falters. Your legs ache from crouching and springing up, sweat running into you. Your eyes. The man beside you doesn't even blink, his motions sharp as a blade. You mutter that he must be carved from wood. He almost smiles, almost. Lunch is bread, cheese and olives, eaten in silence under the watchful gaze of officers. You chew quickly, praying no one notices the crumbs on your lap. Then it's back to drills, marching with banners, practicing formations, singing military chants until your throat is raw. Your body longs for rest, but rest is not in the Janissary vocabulary. As dusk falls, the drill yard glows with torchlight. The soldiers kneel for evening prayers, their voices rising together in solemn unison. You kneel too, though your knees crack loudly against the packed earth. No one laughs. Here, silence is discipline. When the prayer ends, men file back to barracks, their steps still perfectly in rhythm. You collapse onto a rough mattress, ears still echoing with drum beats. Around you, soldiers polish muskets, mend boots, and whisper about campaigns in Hungary and Persia. You close your eyes, every muscle aching, and realize civilization here doesn't soften you, it sharpens you into part of a blade. Whether you like it or not, you've been hammered into step with an empire. Your body aches from Janissary drills, but the scenery shifts again, this time into shimmering heat. The marble courtyards of Delhi gleam like mirrors under the blazing sun. White domes rise above fountains that gurgle faintly, though even the water seems tired of the heat. You tug at your tunic, sweat sticking to your skin in sheets. Welcome to the Mughal palace, where splendor and suffocation arrive in the same breath. Courtiers drift across the courtyard in saffron and teal robes, their silks clinging dark with perspiration. Peacock fans wave lazily, moved by servants who look just as wilted as their masters. You follow them inside, only to discover the palace halls offer little relief. Marble walls reflect sunlight, trapping it like an oven. The air hangs thick, perfumed with rosewater and incense, yet beneath the sweetness lurks the sharp tang of sweat. You're handed a long-necked bottle of sherbet, a chilled drink flavoured with pomegranate. The first sip is glorious, tart and cool on your tongue, but it barely dents the furnace of your body. A servant ladles rosewater onto the floor, hoping to cool the chamber, though it only leaves streaks across polished stone. A court poet recites verses, his voice smooth as melted honey. The courtiers murmur their approval, fanning themselves with jeweled paddles. You, however, are too distracted by the sweat dripping into your eyes to appreciate his metaphors about moons and love. Historians still argue whether Mughal palaces were feats of comfort or just monuments to aesthetics. Today, you'd say they're giant greenhouses for melting humans. Lunch is served on brass platters, biryani fragrant with saffron, kebabs glistening with fat, mango slices so ripe they drip down your chin. The flavors are exquisite, richer than anything you've eaten so far on your journey, but the heat dulls your appetite. You nibble slowly, while others feast heartily, their laughter ringing through the hall. A boy darts between guests, scattering rose petals from a wicker basket, an attempt at elegance that mostly sticks damply to your arms. The afternoon drags on with music. Sitar strings twang, drums echo, dancers whirl in skirts that shimmer like fire. Their movements are graceful, hypnotic, but your vision blurs, sweat clouding your eyes. A courtier jokes that only the weak faint. You force a laugh, though your knees wobble dangerously. In desperation, you slip outside to the gardens. At last, a breeze whispers across fountains lined with lotus blossoms. Shade trees stretch their branches and parakeets shriek overhead. You sink onto a marble bench, grateful for even a breath of cooler air. Nearby, gardeners in indigo tunics trim hedges shaped like peacocks. Civilization here is not just survival, it's bending nature into beauty, even if it nearly cooks you alive. As dusk settles, the heat softens. Lanterns flicker across pools, their reflections dancing with stars. Courtiers gather once more, sipping sherbet and trading gossip about wars and marriages. You recline against a column, too weary to care about politics. For a moment, with the air finally cooling and jasmine drifting on the breeze, you understand the lure of this palace life. But then a mosquito bites your ankle, and you swat it with a sigh, remembering that even splendor comes with stings. The cool, jasmine-scented gardens dissolve, and you find yourself kneeling on tatami mats in a hall of polished wood. Paper lanterns glow softly, their light golden against painted screens of cranes and pines. Before you rests a curved blade sheathed in lacquer, and around you, men in indigo and saffron robes bow with solemn grace. Welcome to samurai etiquette, where the katana shines as brightly as the rules that bind it. A stern instructor gestures for you to bow. You lower your head too quickly and nearly bump the mat with your nose. A ripple of disapproval passes through the room. The instructor clears his throat and demonstrates again. Slow, measured, spine straight, eyes down but not shut. You mimic him, your clumsy bow earning a faint nod. Progress, but only barely. The sword comes next. You lift the katana, surprised at its balance, lighter than the Roman gladius, yet radiating an edge that hums with danger. You're shown how to draw it, left hand firm on the scabbard, right hand snapping the blade free in one swift arc. You try, but the blade catches halfway, producing an awkward half-draw that looks more like pulling a carrot from the ground. The samurai beside you suppresses a smirk. Historians still argue whether samurai were bound more by honor or by political necessity. All you know is that every gesture here feels like walking a tightrope. Even your breathing feels regulated, steady, deliberate, respectful. The instructor corrects your grip, sliding your fingers into place, then nods. You exhale, shoulders tense as bowstrings. Training shifts to sparring with wooden swords, bokken heavier than expected. You square off against a boy half your size, confident you can handle him. He lunges, his strike snapping against your ribs with a crack that sends you stumbling. The room bursts into restrained laughter. You bow stiffly, gasping, while he bows back, calm as a pond. Clearly you're not the prodigy here. Afternoon lessons turn from combat to conduct. You're taught how to sit, how to serve tea, how to fold a letter. You pour too quickly, spilling drops onto the mat. A hush falls. One samurai raises an eyebrow so sharply you fear it might slice you in half. You apologize, cheeks burning, then redo the ritual, this time slower. The tea steams gently, fragrant with roasted rice, and you dare to think you've done something right. Dinner is rice, miso soup and grilled fish, eaten in silence except for the soft clink of chopsticks. You fumble once, dropping a piece, but manage to catch it before it splashes. A few approving nods reassure you. Perhaps you're learning. Still, your knees ache from sitting Caesar style, folded neatly under you. You shift and pins and needles shoot up your legs. You resist the urge to topple sideways. As night falls, the lanterns glow brighter, shadows stretching across the tatami. The swords gleam faintly in the flickering light, reminders that honor here is sharper than any blade. You lie on a thin mat, the air cool, the crickets chirping beyond paper screens. Civilization in this hall isn't about brute strength or wealth. It's about precision, respect, and rituals so strict they could slice you in half. You close your eyes, praying tomorrow doesn't involve another spar with a child who fights like lightning. The calm discipline of the samurai hall vanishes, replaced by the thunder of hooves. You're astride a squat horse on a sea of grass that stretches to the horizon in every direction. The wind whips your hair, and the air tastes of dust and dried meat. You've joined the Mongol horde, where the saddle is home, the bow is lifeline, and saddle sores are your new curse. Your mount trots steadily, but the wooden saddle digs into your thighs like a saw. You squirm, trying to find comfort, only to earn a laugh from the rider beside you. He flicks a strip of dried mutton at you, saying, "Chew, it helps." You bite down and nearly crack a tooth. The meat is leathery, salty, and tastes faintly of smoke, but it fills your stomach. Civilization here runs not on bread or wine, but on meat tough enough to double as armor. The horde moves as one, hundreds of riders clad in russet and indigo coats, quivers slung at their sides. They sing guttural chants that roll like thunder across the steppe. Every so often someone looses an arrow skyward just to hear it whistle. You fumble with your own bow, nearly dropping it, and the men chuckle. They draw, knock, and release while galloping at full speed. You barely manage to hold the string without snapping your fingers. Historians still argue whether Mongol riders could truly fire in any direction while riding. Watching them swivel backward to shoot behind without missing stride, you stop doubting. By midday, the sun blazes. The horizon wavers, endless grass rippling like waves. You chew more dried meat, wash it down with kumis, fermented mare's milk handed to you in a leather flask. The taste is sour, fizzy, and unsettlingly warm. You cough, wiping your mouth while the riders grin. To them, this is life's nectar. To you, it's spoiled yogurt with a kick. Afternoon drills begin, the commander signals, and suddenly the riders fan out in perfect formation, bows raised. You scramble to follow, your horse nearly veering off. Arrows streak through the sky, thudding into targets shaped like men. You miss entirely, your arrow landing in the grass a dozen feet short. The men roar with laughter, but not cruelly, more like brothers mocking a clumsy cousin. Still, your cheeks burn hotter than the sun. The march never ends. Horses trot endlessly, hooves drumming like war drums. You shift in the saddle, pain radiating through your legs. One rider leans over, smirking. "You'll walk tomorrow. The horse will be fine." Comforting. As dusk falls, the horde halts to set camp. Yurts rise quickly, felt walls unfurled, fires lit. Pots of stew simmer with mutton, onions, and millet. You slump near the flames, sipping more kumis to stay polite. Children chase each other between the tents, while warriors sharpen arrows, their faces glowing in the firelight. The air hums with life, fierce and unyielding. Later, under a canopy of stars, sharper than blades, a singer begins a throat song, the low vibrations echoing across the plain. You lie back on a saddle, sore and exhausted, listening as the sound blends with the night wind. Civilization here isn't stone or parchment, it's speed, unity, and the endless horizon. Your eyelids sag, the chants rumbling in your chest, and you drift off, wondering if you'll ever walk normally again. The endless Mongol steppe dissolves, and suddenly you're shuffling through marble corridors in Constantinople. The air is perfumed with incense, cool and heavy, but the peace ends quickly when a clerk thrusts a scroll into your arms. Welcome to the Byzantine bureaucracy, where survival depends not on swords or saddles, but on ink, stamps, and endless petitions. The hall glitters with mosaics, gold tesserae catching lamplight, saints gazing sternly from the walls. Eunuchs in teal and russet robes bustle past, their slippers whispering against polished floors. Each carries scrolls bound with ribbons, sealed with blobs of wax. You stagger forward, nearly colliding with a scribe bent under a tower of parchment. He hisses, steadying the pile before vanishing into another chamber. At a long table, officials debate a petition. One insists a farmer owes taxes on goats. Another claims the goats were eaten by raiders. Voices rise, scrolls are waved like weapons, and ink splatters onto silk sleeves. You set your own scroll down gingerly, praying no one asks you to explain its contents. You haven't the faintest idea what it says, probably something about wheat quotas. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine bureaucracy was efficient or suffocating. Standing here, sweat dripping as eunuchs argue over goats, you know your answer. You're ordered to copy records. A clerk slams a wax tablet in front of you and thrusts a stylus into your hand. The wax is already crowded with cramped Greek letters, and your clumsy additions look like a child's doodles. The clerk sighs and mutters about incompetence, scraping over your work to erase it. You blush, wishing you were back hauling stones in Egypt. At least there you knew which end of the block was up. Midday arrives with bread, olives, and watered wine eaten quickly at desks. There's no laughter, only muttering as clerks compare tax lead. Gers searching for errors. One man insists he's uncovered fraud. Another accuses him of falsifying numbers. The argument swells until a eunuch slams his seal onto the table, declaring the matter postponed. Everyone sighs in unison, as though this happens hourly. Afternoon brings more chaos. A petition from a distant province demands grain relief after a drought. Another requests funds to repair aqueducts. Eunuchs debate furiously, voices echoing through the marble chamber. You lean back, dazed by the drone, until someone shoves a wax seal into your hand and orders you to stamp approval. You hesitate, but under their glare you press the seal into the wax, leaving a crooked imprint. The room groans. Civilization here is paperwork with consequences. By dusk, your hand cramps, your ears ring from bickering, and your head aches from the scent of melted wax. You stumble outside into the courtyard where the evening air is cooler, scented faintly with roses. The domes of Hagia Sophia rise above the city, glowing red in the sunset. You breathe deeply, grateful to be away from scrolls for even a moment. But as you watch eunuchs scurry past with yet more petitions, you realize the empire doesn't survive on warriors alone. It survives on ink, stamps, and endless debates about goats, taxes, and aqueducts. And though your back isn't broken tonight, your spirit feels bruised from bureaucracy. You sigh, rubbing ink from your fingers, and mutter, "At least the goats are safe." You barely escape the Byzantine hall before the world tilts again, carrying you into a bustling square. The air brims with spice and chatter, the scent of cinnamon and roasting chestnuts mingling with horse dung. Bright awnings ripple overhead, shading stalls stacked with bolts of cloth, baskets of figs and jars of saffron. Welcome to the Renaissance marketplace where art and commerce collide and your purse empties faster than your patience. Vendors shout over one another, their voices a chorus of promises. A man in an indigo tunic waves a length of Venetian silk, claiming it's strong enough to stop a blade. Beside him, a woman in saffron robes boasts of dyes imported from the East, her fingers stained red from madder root. You run your hands over a bolt of teal velvet, soft as a dream, until the merchant quotes a price high enough to wake you in horror. Musicians play in a corner flutes, lutes and tambourines, while jugglers toss wooden balls in rhythmic arcs. Children dart between stalls, giggling as they tug at their mother's skirts. A dog noses through a wicker basket of apples, toppling it, and the vendor curses loudly, chasing it with a broom. The crowd laughs, then surges on, spilling into every alley. You try haggling for a pouch of pepper, only to be outmaneuvered by a boy no older than 12. He insists on triple the price, citing scarcity after a bad harvest. You stammer, unwilling to argue, and hand over more coins than you should. The boy grins, teeth flashing, and vanishes into the crowd. Civilization's sharpest blades, it seems, are the tongues of merchants. Historians still argue whether Renaissance markets were the lifeblood of progress or just chaos dressed in colours. Standing here, coins lighter in your pouch, you lean toward both. A commotion draws your attention. An artist has set up a makeshift studio, sketching faces for a few copper coins. You watch as he captures likenesses with charcoal, exaggerating noses and chins for comic effect. The crowd roars with laughter, and soon you're being shoved forward to sit. He squints at you, scratches furiously, and turns the paper around. Your portrait, a weary traveller with a crooked back and empty purse. The crowd erupts, and you can't help but laugh too. It's painfully accurate. As evening falls, lanterns flicker to life, casting warm glows over the stalls. Bakers hawk sugared almonds, their sweet scent battling the stink of livestock penned nearby. Musicians switch to slower tunes, their notes floating gently over the square. You buy a small cone of roasted chestnuts, hot and smoky, savouring their warmth as you lean against a wall. Around you deals continue, coins clinking, voices rising, fabrics unfurled. The square begins to thin as night deepens. Merchants cover their goods, musicians pack away their instruments, and the laughter ebbs into the shadows. You shuffle away, purse nearly empty, stomach finally full, head spinning from the noise and colours. Civilization here dazzles with abundance, yet demands endless bargaining, endless coins, endless energy. You sigh, clutching the last roasted chestnut in your palm, and realize even markets can break you. But tonight at least you've survived. And now, as promised, the wind down. The stalls fade into twilight, their lanterns dimming until only the soft glow of embers remains. The voices of merchants and musicians grow quieter, replaced by the gentle hush of night air. You feel the weight of the day ease from your shoulders like armor slowly unbuckled, the cobblestones beneath your feet cool, carrying you toward rest. The stars stretch wide above you, patient and eternal, watching as the world finally stills. You breathe deeply, the air softer now, the sense of spice and smoke dissolving into a calm nothingness. Each sound grows slower, each thought lighter, until even the memory of aching feet and endless bargaining drifts away. Civilizations rise and fall, their noise and demands fierce in the moment, yet fleeting in the vast hush of time. What lingers is not the toil or the shouting, but the quiet between, the breath of wind through trees, the flicker of firelight, the stillness under stars. And so you close your eyes, letting the noise fade. The world softens, the night cradles you, and the long road of history unrolls behind like a dream half forgotten. Sleep now, gently, knowing tomorrow waits far away, and tonight belongs only to rest.